Welcome to today's deep dive. We are jumping into a really fascinating stack of biographical texts, interviews, and articles about a beloved American television icon.
Yeah, and the mission of this deep dive is, well, it's to explore how one of the most recognizable figures in pop culture basically hid a profound struggle in plain sight.
Right, and how he, managed to turn a lifetime of being called stupid into this massive legacy of empowerment. So I want you, the listener, to picture this. The year is 2023. We're at the Emmy Awards.
Such a powerful moment.
It really is. A 79-year-old man walks up to the stage to accept an award he has been waiting for his entire adult life. I mean, he's been a working actor for 50 years.
Yeah, 50 years in the business.
Exactly. And as he holds this trophy for his role in the series Barry, he's just openly weeping.
It's an incredibly raw thing to watch. If you see the footage, you're not just looking at a professional triumph, right? You are watching 5 decades of pent-up emotional baggage just spilling over on live television.
Yeah, and he steps up to the microphone and he thanks his wife, Stacy, who's been married to for 48 years. He thanks his agent, but then he does something kind of unusual for an Emmy speech.
Right, he makes a very specific point.
He does. He specifically thanks a childhood teacher who once looked him in the eye and explicitly told him he would never amount to anything.
Which, tells you a whole lot about what fuels a person. To carry the ghost of a dismissive teacher with you all the way to an Emmy stage at 79 years old, well, it implies a really profound, lifelong need to prove your own worth.
Yeah, definitely. And here is the massive revelation for you as we get into the meat of this deep dive. That man on the stage is Henry Winkler.
The Fonz.
The Fonz. You know him. Everybody knows him. He's an absolute American television icon. But despite this Emmy, despite 2 Golden Globes and an induction into the Television Hall of Fame, the sources confirm something shocking.
Yeah, it's wild.
To this very day, Henry Winkler still cannot read scripts like other people.
I mean, let that sink in for a second. His entire profession, the singular thing he is world famous for, requires interpreting the written word.
Right.
And yet the written word is literally his biggest obstacle.
Okay, wait. I have to push back on this right out of the gate. How is that physically possible? I mean, let's unpack this.
Sure.
If I walked into a hospital and the lead surgeon casually mentioned they couldn't read a medical chart, I would run out of the room. How does someone who literally cannot process a script survive in the Hollywood machine for 50 years without being exposed on day one? It's like trying to be a master architect when you can't read a blueprint.
It's a great analogy. And to understand the mechanics of how he survived, well, we have to look at the neurology of what he was actually battling and then how he bypassed it.
Because he didn't just survive, did he?
No, not at all. He was forced to invent an entirely different way of processing information. The sources point out that he operates today the exact same way he did in 1973, at the very beginning of his career.
Wow. Okay, so let's go back to 1973 then, Los Angeles. Henry Winkler is 28 years old. He's been in the city for, less than a year?
Yeah, very new to LA.
And he has exactly $32 in his bank account. But he manages to land an audition for a new ABC sitcom about a 1950s family.
Right, and we should clarify, he isn't auditioning for some massive lead role. He's reading for a minor working-class player character named Arthur Fonzarelli.
Just a background guy, basically.
Exactly. This guy is essentially a background element, supposed to have maybe 1 or 2 lines an episode just to get a quick laugh.
But Henry walks into that audition room carrying this massive secret. He has severe dyslexia.
Right.
Now, in 1973, he doesn't have the vocabulary for it. He doesn't know the medical terminology. All he knows is that for his entire life, every authority figure has told him he is lazy and stupid.
Which is heartbreaking.
It is. They hand him a script in the casting room, and the words just swim on the page. He can't read it.
So let's break down what is actually happening in his brain in that moment. Because dyslexia isn't just seeing words backwards, which is a really common misconception.
Right, it's more complicated than that.
Much more. It is basically a phonological processing deficit. When you or I read a word, our brains automatically and effortlessly decode the visual symbols, the letters, into sounds. It's instantaneous.
You don't even think about it.
Exactly. But for a dyslexic brain, that automatic routing system is disconnected. They have to manually decode every single letter, hold it in their working memory, and then try to piece the sound together.
Ugh, that sounds utterly exhausting.
It is incredibly taxing on the brain's cognitive load. So imagine being handed a piece of paper in a high-pressure casting room. You can't take it home.
And even if you did, it wouldn't help, right?
Right, it wouldn't help you decode it any faster. If you sit there and try to sound out every single word, the producers are going to assume you are illiterate or unprepared, and you will be shown the door immediately.
So he's backed into a corner. He's completely desperate, and he invents this workaround. He arrives at the audition early.
Yeah, this is brilliant.
He sits next to another actor in the waiting room and very quietly, very politely asks if they wouldn't mind running the scene with him. And he doesn't look at the paper. He just listens.
This is the critical pivot point of his entire career, honestly. He completely abandons the visual cortex.
Right. He treats the script like a piece of music. He listens to the other actor read the lines, and he absorbs the rhythm, the cadence, the pauses, the inflection.
Like a song.
Exactly. And then he memorizes it instantly in his head. He walks into the room and performs it as if he's been studying the pages for weeks.
And because he absorbed it auditorily, his delivery wasn't stiff. He wasn't just, reciting text from a page. He was replicating a natural human conversation.
Which the producers loved.
Oh, they were blown away. The sources say they hear him do it once, look at each other, and cancel all the other auditions right then and there.
And the rest is history. Within 2 seasons of Happy Days, that minor background character becomes the undeniable center of the show.
The biggest thing on TV.
Yeah. The Fonz becomes the most famous face in 1970s America. The leather jacket goes to the Smithsonian. Kids are dressing up as him for Halloween. His improvised thumbs up becomes like a national gesture.
He is the defining symbol of American cool.
But okay, here's where it gets really interesting to me. The paradox here is staggering. He is projecting absolute, impenetrable confidence to millions of people every week, while internally, he is terrified.
Yeah, he's the coolest guy in the world, but inside, he's still the kid teachers called lazy and stupid.
What kind of psychological toll does that take? Wearing the mask of the coolest guy in the world while hiding this massive vulnerability, it must have been exhausting.
It's the ultimate manifestation of imposter syndrome, magnified by international fame. The mental energy required to constantly mask a perceived deficit is just draining. You are perpetually on high alert.
Waiting to be exposed.
Right. But there is a profound irony buried in this mechanism. The very strategy he used to hide his dyslexia is exactly what made him such a brilliant reactive actor.
Wait, how so? Just because he wasn't looking down at a page?
Think about what happens when actors rely heavily on a written script. They can easily get stuck in their own heads, right? Anticipating their next line, decoding the text, it makes them rigid.
Oh, sure. They're thinking about the words, not the scene.
Exactly. Because Henry couldn't read fluently, he had to rely entirely on the musicality of human speech. To know when to speak his lines, he had to intensely listen to his scene partners.
Oh, wow.
He had to watch their body language closely. It forced him to be a deeply present, highly reactive performer.
So the very thing he thought was his greatest flaw, his inability to process written text, actually forced him to develop a superpower in active listening. His camouflage made him a star.
That's exactly it. But the tragic part of this narrative is that immense external validation doesn't cure internal shame. He was rich, he was famous, he was universally beloved, but he still didn't understand why his brain worked the way it did. He just thought he was a stupid person who had somehow tricked the world.
Which brings us to the diagnosis. And this is where the story challenges everything we assume about getting answers. Fast forward a few years, Henry is now 31 years old.
Right. He's an adult now.
Yeah. And his stepson, Jed, is 8. And the boy is really struggling in school.
Yeah.
So Henry and his wife take Jed to the doctors to be evaluated.
And the doctors conduct their assessments, and they sit the parents down to explain that Jed has dyslexia.
So the doctors start listing out the symptoms. They explain the phonological deficit, the difficulty with spelling, the trouble tracking lines of text. And as they're talking, Henry interrupts them.
He has an epiphany.
A huge one. He stops the doctor mid-sentence and says, "Can you repeat that?" He sits in stunned silence as he realizes that these medical professionals are perfectly describing his own childhood.
The puzzle pieces suddenly snap together for the first time in his life. Everything makes sense.
But here is where I get totally lost in the narrative. If I spent 30 years thinking I was fundamentally stupid, and a doctor finally gave me a medical neurological explanation, an actual name for it, I would be thrilled.
You think so, yeah.
I would be throwing a party. Finally, a medical reason. But the sources say that night, Henry went home and cried. Why did this break him down instead of lifting him up?
Well, because you're assuming a diagnosis only brings relief. In reality, a late-in-life diagnosis like this often triggers a massive wave of retrospective grief.
Retrospective grief. What do you mean by that?
When you finally get the answer at 31 years old, you aren't just looking forward, you know. You are forced to violently reevaluate your entire past. You have to look back at every failed report card, every time a teacher humiliated you.
Oh, man.
Every time your classmates laughed at you when you were forced to read aloud. He wasn't crying out of relief. He was mourning the little boy who suffered for 30 years.
That makes so much sense. The sources actually mention his own parents, who were German immigrants, would refer to him as dummer Hund, which is German for dumb dog. He carried that insult with him his whole life.
It's awful. Imagine holding on to that shame only to find out it was completely baseless. He had to sit with the crushing realization that his suffering was completely unnecessary.
Grieving the alternate lives he could have had.
Exactly. He wasn't broken. His environment was simply misaligned with his neurology. And nobody, not a single adult in his life, had bothered to figure that out.
Sitting with that kind of pain could easily turn someone bitter. It would be so easy to retreat into your Hollywood mansion and say, well, the world failed me, but I won anyway, so forget everyone else.
But he doesn't do that.
He does the exact opposite.
Yeah.
And this leads to what I think is the most surprising career pivot I've ever seen. Because he realized what he lost, he decides he is going to make sure no other child loses that same time.
Right. In 2003, the man who we just established struggles to read, cannot type, and cannot spell correctly, decides he is going to write children's books.
It sounds like an impossible premise. It sounds like a terrible idea, honestly. How do you write a book when the mechanics of writing are your greatest obstacle?
This is quite the challenge.
He essentially had to reverse engineer his brain. He partnered with an established writer named Lynn Oliver, and she acted as the hardware to his software.
That's a perfect way to describe it. Their collaboration is a masterclass in separating the generation of ideas from the execution of those ideas.
Right, because he would pace around her office, acting out the characters, pitching jokes, narrating the emotional arcs aloud. He played the melody in the air, and Lynn Oliver transcribed his brilliant ideas into text.
By doing that, he bypassed the mechanical barrier of writing entirely. He didn't let his inability to spell stop him from being a storyteller.
And together, they created the Hank Zipzer series. Hank is a fourth grader with undiagnosed dyslexia. He is loud, he is funny, he is deeply kind, and he is constantly getting into trouble at school for things that the adults around him just do not understand.
Which is, of course, a direct, unfiltered reflection of Henry Winkler's own childhood.
Exactly. But rewritten so that the child is the hero, not the punchline. The first book, Niagara Falls, or Does It, came out in 2003 with a modest start. But then a grassroots movement happened.
Yeah, the word of mouth was incredible.
Teachers saw how neurodivergent kids reacted to it, and they started recommending it to parents. Parents recommended it to other parents. Special education programs began buying them.
Because it filled a massive void in children's literature. For decades, books for struggling readers were either incredibly dry or really condescending.
The series absolutely exploded. Today, there are over 40 books in the Hank Zipzer universe. They have been translated into 9 different languages, selling over 5 million copies worldwide. The BBC even adapted it into a television series.
To massive success.
But there's a specific statistic from the publisher that I think perfectly encapsulates why this worked so well.
Oh, the quote about fluent readers.
Yes. The publisher noted recently that out of these 40-plus books, not a single one was written by a fluent reader. Yet every single one of them is perfectly crafted for kids who cannot read fluently.
Because the books were born from spoken word. Henry's auditory processing meant the dialogue sounded natural, the chapters were short, the humor moved fast.
The exact neurological difference that excluded him from the academic world allowed him to create the ultimate tool for kids who felt excluded just like him.
It is the definition of poetic justice. But, writing the books wasn't enough for him.
No, it wasn't. The sources show that publishing wasn't the end goal, it was just the entry point. He needed to look these kids in the eye.
Connecting his past directly to their present.
Exactly. For the last 20 years, almost continuously, he has traveled relentlessly across America, visiting elementary schools, middle schools, and youth detention centers. And he does it all completely unpaid.
He is physically removing the barrier between the celebrity and the child.
He sits down with kids who have learning difficulties, kids who are frustrated, angry, the ones the system has labeled as problem children. And he tells them his truth.
Which is so powerful.
He tells them, I couldn't read either. Those teachers who called me stupid, they were wrong.
Think about the neurological impact of that interaction on a developing brain. When a child is struggling, their brain starts hardwiring a narrative of failure. they internalize that they are broken.
Yeah, that they're defective somehow.
Right. Having a universally recognized, successful adult shatter that narrative can fundamentally alter a child's entire trajectory. Somewhere in America right now, a fourth grader who thinks they are broken is sitting in a library reading about Hank Zipzer and realizing they are okay.
There's a specific quote he delivers on these school tours, and I want you, the listener, to really hear the emotional core of this message. He looks at these kids and says, "You are very strong. You are wonderful, and how you learn has nothing to do with how smart you are."
It's profound because he is decoupling intelligence from the standardized methods of measuring it. Intelligence isn't your ability to read quickly, it's your capacity to adapt, to understand, to create.
We started this deep dive, looking at a terrified 28-year-old actor hiding his inability to read in an audition room. We watched him leverage that to become a defining television icon. And we end with a 79-year-old champion for neurodivergent kids.
It's an incredible arc, and his story forces us to completely reframe how we view human struggle. We spend so much of our lives trying to fix the parts of ourselves that we think are broken.
Right.
But what if Henry Winkler's story proves that the things society labels as our biggest deficits are actually the hidden architecture of our greatest superpowers?
Wow, yeah. If he hadn't been forced to memorize the rhythm and the soul of other people's words just to survive, he never would have become the brilliant, empathetic artist who changed television.
Exactly. If he had been able to read fluently, he never would have relied on Lynn Oliver to translate his auditory imagination, and they never would have created the books that saved millions of kids.
It makes you wonder about your own life, you know. What broken parts of your own story or your own brain have you been desperately trying to fix or hide? What if the things you think are your biggest vulnerabilities are actually the blueprints for your greatest unacknowledged strengths? It's definitely something to mull over the next time you feel like you aren't measuring up. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.